Up to tossing grenade the windmills. Windmills.
Precyber by T.C. Ricks and Ken Leitner. Chapter 51. Ezekiel Norn was not a man given to gloating. In fact, he credited one of the reasons for his success as never underestimating his opponents. But this time he felt he had to. Clark Yossarian had been an unexpected blessing. It was something he had not really understood until after Clark died, and even then, even after all that had happened, he had not been convinced of Clark's demise until the lab teams had successfully identified his DNA at the scene. Granted, the lab only gave it a 25% certainty, but Ezekiel would take it. Clark Yossarian's death called for celebration. The main dilemma, of course, was how little time remained before the culmination of his life's work. Did he have time to celebrate right now? He smiled to himself. He felt just like his brother trying to walk out one of his nephews. Why not do both? He certainly possessed sufficient resources to celebrate until the end of his natural life, and if there was ever a time for celebration, this was certainly it. He leaned back and thought, but what was appropriate? He almost considered having one of his secretaries make a list, but he could not trust them with this kind of thing. Almost no one knew the truth at this point. In fact, now that he thought about it, no one else but him. Everyone else had died. So he picked up the phone and began to dial. He had a number of different assistants. A simple call to each one would reduce the suspicions of such an unusual request. Roger, yes. I want you to go to an immediate press release. I have a cancellation for you. We're ending the line. Martial strike. I don't care if it's profitable. Find something to replace it. I want it ended in 2 weeks. Got it? Goodbye, Clark's game. Murray? Yes, I have a list of revolutionary cell members that I want tracked down. Most likely they're all dead at this point, but just in case, they're to be terminated forthwith. Goodbye, Clark's cell. Splinters? What a stupid name. But the underworld contact he had was without a peer. I've got a list of names I want dead by the end of the week. Got it? Whatever it takes. Yes, I'm willing to pay. Goodbye, Clark's friends. It still did not feel appropriate enough. He made another phone call. Jal? Yeah, you remember that favor you owed me? Ezekiel chuckled. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, one of the many favors you owe me. Yes, I want a record purged from the system. Don't tell me you can't do that. If anyone can, it's the FBI, and I want it done in a month. Goodbye any trace that Clark Yossarian had ever lived. For a moment, Ezekiel considered going farther, eliminating school, second cousins, and the like, but stopped. Clark had annoyed him, and these far little actions were routine. None could be traced back to him, but the more he did, the more there was even a small chance that it might come back to him. No, he needed something more personal, something that really and truly told him that his victory was complete, and he had it. One more phone call. Anila? Yes. You know that little kinky thing that you tried to interest me in the other day? Yeah, that's the one. Well, I changed my mind. I want your best, and I mean best, female made up to those specifications at my office within 2 hours. It was the waiting that was the worst. He had not realized how infatuated he had become until this point. Fortunately, he had not allowed his emotions to get in the way of dealing with Clark. A part of him, in the back of his mind, also made him realize how vulnerable it had made him feel. That he could not tolerate. There was a knock at the door. Ezekiel went up to answer it himself. She astonished him. She had Emily's exact face, frame, and build, though her breasts were a bit larger. She was dressed in a stunning black and red evening gown, which remained classy, yet was incredibly sexy at the same time, drawing attention to her figure in all the right places. Yet retaining enough mystery to hearken to the feminine power that she held. I'm impressed, Ezekiel smiled and invited her in. You should be. Her voice matched Elizabeth's as well. He wondered if the girl playing Emily had any idea how long he was going to want her to run the contract. In fact, he vaguely recalled a brainwashing tech that research and development had told him about earlier. Memories were not quite as permanent as people like to think. He ordered Thai noodles with the oldest wine from his cellar, 100 years old. Ezekiel had never really gone in for wine tasting as a hobby, but he could at least appreciate its rarity and expense. He raised a glass to the fake Emily. He smiled and said, "To victory." She returned the toast and said, "To victory." She did so without hesitation, but Ezekiel knew she didn't have any idea what that meant. No matter. By the time he was through with this one, she would know everything. He smiled and sipped his wine. As celebrations went, this one was excellent. Emily proved his skill in the bedroom as she did dress-up. Perfect. Clark had accumulated a nice sum of money on his disposable card. His name cleared, he could spend it. However, he had learned from Gabriel to avoid leaving any trail. He normally withdrew cash from remote ATM locations and spent the cash in the few remaining places that honored it. Since that made spending difficult, Clark had begun to save like never before. He would have preferred not to leave a trail today either, but he was desperate. They needed new clothes, a shower, and transportation, and not necessarily in that order. That meant that he would have to use the card. That meant leaving a trail. C'est la vie. The trick would be making sure the trail did not point to their destination. They took a cab to Midtown and left a nice tip for the mess they'd left behind. They bought new clothes, rented a hotel room, showered and changed. They put a "Do Not Disturb" sign out, went back down to the lobby, used the hotel ATM, and walked to the subway. The whole afternoon cost Clark an entire 2 weeks' pay, but once they sat down in the train, he finally felt a sense of security. He could easily tell that Emily was relieved as well. They could get off the train anywhere they wished. Their brief trail ended in Midtown. Gabriel had already arranged the next hideout location outside the perimeter in some suburban blighted strip mall. He had a big operation, and they could not always find a large enough place to stay in the city. However, Clark decided against going there. Gabriel always kept a few emergency safe houses online as well, and Clark decided to use a small one just a few miles north in Buckhead. Buckhead had a number of trendy little clothing shops and professional offices. They constantly turned over as fads changed, but every so often, even those buildings got a little run down. Like everywhere else, the land would fall back on the city for a bit, until the city finally cleared the derelict building off and sold it back to, often, the same developer once they had a new project in mind. Emily and Clark got off the subway at Buckhead Station and walked to the Peachtree Road to East Shadow Lawn Avenue. They walked down Shadow Lawn about a quarter of a mile further to the safe house. The building was most recently been an art gallery. The Fox antique look of the building had at first added to the ambience of the place. However, when the art scene finally tired of the latest Dadaist collection of junk, the realtor could not find anyone else to inhabit the place. The last artist to show the gallery had committed suicide in an extreme piece of performance art. As a result, it might not have sold, no matter what the condition. As Clark remembered the story, the performer had cut a small slice of his wrist, placed a catheter in the vein so the bleeding would not stop, and then tied himself to a cross. His plan was to bleed all during the show to see who would help him. Unfortunately, the rich clientele assumed it was all an act, and the artist bled to death just as the gallery started serving cocktails. No one noticed for another 3 hours. Shortly afterward, the gallery was closed for good. They entered the house and did a quick survey of the location. The gallery had knocked most of the ground floor walls out to create their display space. The few that remained served more as an additional vertical space to hang pictures that were actually from rooms. The kitchen was still intact and had at least 3 walls to block it from the view. Clark noticed a significant brown stain in one corner. "That looks like a blood stain, Clark. This isn't where that artist killed himself, is it?" Clark nodded, feeling queasy as he did, and then motioned to Emily to follow him upstairs. The top floor looked a little residential, though all the bedrooms contained leftover office furniture at the moment. The last room at the end of the hall must have originally been the master bedroom. It had been an old sofa along one wall. Clark examined the sofa further and found a pull-out bed inside. He removed the cushions and started prepping the bed. Emily found the pile of boxes that Gabriel must have dropped off, as they contained some fresh linens for the bed, a couple of prepaid phones, first aid supplies, and a few weeks' worth of military rations. Once their domestic chores were complete, they kicked off their shoes and socks and spread out on the bed. They were exhausted at this point, but too charged to go to sleep immediately. "Clark, Gabriel is dead, and Shadow Leader is probably trying to kill us. What do we do now?" "We rest for now. We need to figure out our next move. We're playing for keeps. We can't afford another mistake like today." "Who's left that we can trust?" Clark did not respond for a long time. Finally he said, "No one. But perhaps there's someone we can use." "Who?" "Those drug cartel guys we used for transportation from Colombia." "Are you kidding? Didn't you tell me that they stuck you two as cutthroats on the way back? God only knows what they were up to." Clark sat up. Something was clicking in his mind. He could feel the connection snap into place. He finally shouted, "Of course!" "What?" Shadow Leader said that he found out about some kind of strike, right? Something that Quark's planned to do to make the revolution look bad? Something to make the population turn on them for security? Yeah, so? Well, I could be wrong, but those two seem like the kind of type for that work. Clark, this seems like a stretch to me. No. It fits perfectly. We chased that mercenary Mike down there, right? He admitted to shooting the president. So if the corps needed to arrange that sort of attack, then Mike might very well do the deed, or at least make the arrangements, right? Emily responded slowly. Okay, I'll grant you that. Those two left right after we killed the merc. He probably went down there to hire him. The Quarks believed that they needed actors to pull this off. They needed patsies. Those two are perfect. Almost as good as Islamic fundamentalists. Okay, that sounds good, but there's still plenty of other explanations. Yeah, but that doesn't this deserve a little more attention? Emily yawned and said, maybe? Emily, look, we need supplies as well. Those two cartel guys are my best shot for staying underground a while longer. So we probably need to talk to them anyway. We might as well ask what we can ask about those two on the ship. Emily closed her eyes and said, okay, Clark. But first I need to sleep. Ernesto and Che received a call from Clark 20 minutes later. Clark had grabbed one of the phones and walked a few blocks from the safe house before making the call. When Ernesto heard the story, he agreed to meet Clark immediately. Ernesto wanted very much to hear about the missile attack. Che was glued to the television panel. The news station was broadcasting live pictures of explosions downtown. The TV news reported that the revolution had caused the explosion. They claimed it was a bomb-making incident. But as Che started flipping back and forth between the news video and the net, the bloggers were reporting something entirely different. According to numerous net sources, a missile had hit the building. When Ernesto told Che that Clark had come from the site of the explosion, Che ran out to the car. Clark frowned as the car screeched to a halt in the parking lot in front of the dealership he'd agreed to meet them. He would rather meet them at a comic or game store down the street, but Piedmont Avenue also hosted a fancy car dealerships that Ernesto had suggested instead. Clark relented as he decided it would be better to keep one of his favorite stores out of trouble. He walked over to the car. Ernesto started speaking at first. Clark, how are you doing? I'm fine. Are you sure? You escaped from a blown-up building. I was fairly far away when the missile hit. Che interrupted. I knew it! That stupid, insipid bitch of the American News Channel was just spouting the corporate line. You can't trust them anymore. They lie whenever it serves their interest. Ernesto spoke calmly. Che, Clark wants some information from us. Brother, I'll tell him anything he wants to know if he tells me exactly what happened downtown with the missile. Ernesto frowned. Che never did have much business sense. Fine. Clark, why don't you ask the question first, just to make sure we can answer it? Clark asked, those two guys I shipped back here with, I need to know who booked their passage and where they are now. Well, we can describe the man who booked their passage, but I have no idea where they are now. I'll take what I can get. Ernesto described Mike to a T. Clark spent the next 2 hours relating the details of the missile attack to the brothers. On the plus side, they bought him a really nice dinner. Clark made sure to pack some leftovers for Emily.
I'm Thomas Ricks. Music by Melanie Ricks. Voices by Skip Huffman and Josie Bergen-Lawson. Copyright 2012.
Kenneth Leitner
and Red Anvil Amalgamated.
to fight the forces of evil!